Commander Jae-woo stood on the bridge of the TDF horizon, watching the stars through the massive viewport. His uniform was crisp and clean, but his face showed the stress of the past 3 months. The border conflicts with the alien race known as the Veltharians had kept him awake many nights. The communication panel beeped softly. Lieutenant Hyejin turned from her station with a serious expression. "Commander, we have received new orders from Earth Command." Jae-woo walked over to the communication station. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor of the bridge. "What do they say, Lieutenant?" Hyejin handed him a data pad with the official message. "We are ordered to escort the Veltharian peace delegation to Harmony 7 space station. The peace talks will begin in 3 days." Captain Minho, who had been studying tactical reports at his station, looked up with surprise. "Peace talks? After all the battles we have fought with them?" Jae-woo read the orders carefully. The message was clear, but he could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. These talks could end the war that had already cost too many human lives. Or they could make things much worse. "It seems the Veltharians have agreed to discuss territorial boundaries," Jae-woo said to his crew. "We will meet their delegation at the edge of neutral space and escort them safely to Harmony 7. Lieutenant So-young, the ship's tactical officer, checked her displays. "Commander, our intelligence reports say the Veltharians have ships that are much more advanced than ours. Their weapons and shields are at least 50 years ahead of our technology." Minho stood up from his chair. "Then why do they want peace talks now? They have been winning most of the border fights." Jae-woo had been thinking about the same question. The Veltharians were taller and stronger than humans. Their technology was clearly superior. Their ships moved faster and hit harder than anything in the human fleet. So why were they suddenly interested in talking instead of fighting? "Maybe they are getting tired of the war too," Jae-woo said. "Or maybe they want to end this quickly before we develop better weapons." The bridge was quiet for a moment. Everyone knew that humanity was still new to space travel compared to older alien races. Earth had only been exploring beyond the solar system for about 200 years. The Veltharians had been traveling between stars for over 1,000 years. Engineer Taemin spoke up from his station near the back of the bridge. "Commander, I have been studying their ship designs from our battle recordings. Their technology is impressive, but it seems like they always use the same tactics." "What do you mean?" Jae-woo asked. "They always attack in straight lines. They always use maximum power from the start. They never change their approach during a battle," Taemin explained. "It is like they have one way of doing things, and they never try anything different." Lieutenant Dong-jin, who commanded the ship's security team, nodded in agreement. "I noticed the same thing about their ground forces. They are strong and well-equipped, but they seem to follow the same battle plans every time." Sergeant Boram, who was standing near the security station, added her thoughts. "Maybe having better technology has made them lazy. When you always win easily, you stop thinking about new ways to fight." Jae-woo found these observations interesting. He had been so focused on the Veltharians' superior weapons that he had not thought much about their fighting methods. "Keep watching and learning," he told his crew. "Any information could be useful." The ship's navigation officer called out from his station. "Commander, we will reach the meeting point in 6 hours." "Good. Lieutenant So-young, I want our weapons ready but not powered up. We do not want to look threatening, but we must be prepared for anything." "Yes, sir," So-young replied. "Should we launch fighter patrols?" Jae-woo thought about it. Fighter patrols would show that humans were being careful, but they might also make the Veltharians think that humans did not trust them. "No fighters for now, but have the pilots ready to launch quickly if needed." Minho walked over to stand next to Jae-woo. "Do you really think these peace talks will work?" "I do not know," Jae-woo answered honestly. "But we have to try. Too many good people have died in this war already." The hours passed slowly as the TDF horizon moved toward the meeting point. The crew checked and double-checked all systems. Everyone knew how important this mission was. If something went wrong during the escort mission, the war would probably get much worse. Lieutenant Hyejin received another message from Earth Command. "Commander, we have updates on the Veltharian delegation. Their leader is High Commander Velthara. She is considered one of their most experienced military leaders. What else do we know about her? Jae-woo asked. She has never lost a battle. She has been fighting wars for over 60 years. The intelligence reports say she thinks humans are too primitive to be a real threat to the Veltharian Empire. This information made Jae-woo uncomfortable. If the Veltharian leader already believed humans were not worth worrying about, the peace talks would be very difficult. Does she have any weaknesses? The reports say she is very proud and does not like to be surprised. She always expects to be the smartest person in any meeting. Sergeant Boram laughed quietly. Sounds like someone who has never had to work for a victory. Be careful with that kind of thinking, Jae-woo warned. Underestimating an enemy is just as dangerous as being afraid of them. The navigation officer called out again. Commander, sensors are detecting the Veltharian ships. 3 vessels approaching from the north. Lieutenant So-young studied her tactical display. Confirmed. 3 ships much larger than ours. They are not powering weapons, but their shields are active. Jae-woo moved to the center of the bridge. Open a communication channel. Channel open, Commander. Hye-jin reported. This is Commander. Jae-woo of the Terran Defense Fleet vessel Horizon. We are here to escort your delegation to Harmony 7 Station as agreed. The response came quickly. The voice was female but cold and commanding. This is High Commander Velthara of the Veltharian Imperial Fleet. We are ready to proceed to the station. Try to keep up with our ships, human. The communication ended abruptly. Min-ho shook his head. She sounds friendly. Remember, everyone, Jae-woo said to his crew, we represent all of humanity on this mission. Stay professional no matter what they say or do. The journey to Harmony 7 would take 2 days. Jae-woo had a feeling it was going to be a very long 2 days. The docking bay of Harmony 7 space station was enormous. Commander Jae-woo walked beside High Commander Velthara as they made their way to the conference room. The Veltharian leader was almost 2 meters tall with blue skin and silver eyes that seemed to look down on everything around her. Behind them walked their respective teams. Captain Min-ho and Lieutenant So-young represented the human delegation, while 2 Veltharian officers followed their commander. The station's corridors were wide and clean, designed to accommodate many different alien species. Your station is adequate, Velthara said as they walked, though it lacks the artistic beauty that our people would have included. Jae-woo kept his expression neutral. Harmony 7 was built to be functional rather than beautiful. It serves its purpose as a neutral meeting place. Velthara stopped walking and turned to face him. This is exactly what I mean about your species, human. You think small. You focus on simple survival instead of creating something magnificent. Other delegates in the corridor stopped to watch the conversation. Representatives from several alien species were present for the historic peace talks. Jae-woo was aware that everyone was listening to every word. Perhaps we have different definitions of magnificence, Jae-woo replied calmly. The Veltharian commander laughed. The sound was not pleasant. Your entire species has been exploring space for only 2 centuries. My people have been traveling between stars for over 1,000 years. Yet you think you can negotiate as equals. Lieutenant So-young stepped forward slightly, but Jae-woo held up a hand to stop her from speaking. He had expected this kind of attitude from Velthara based on the intelligence reports. We are here because your government agreed to these talks, Jae-woo said. That suggests your leaders believe we have something worth discussing. My leaders are being cautious, Velthara replied. They want to avoid unnecessary bloodshed by offering you reasonable terms for surrender. The word surrender hung in the air like a threat. Captain Min-ho's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. The other alien delegates watched with great interest. They reached the conference room, which was large and circular with a table that could seat 30 people. Representatives from the Galactic Mediation Council were already present to oversee the negotiations. Counselor Thek, a tall insect-like being, welcomed both delegations. We are honored to host these important peace discussions. Let us begin with opening statements from both sides. The first day of talks did not go well. Velthara presented terms that were completely unacceptable to humanity. She demanded that humans abandon all colonies outside their home solar system and accept Veltharian oversight of Earth's space activities. These terms are unreasonable, Jae-woo said during the afternoon session. You are asking us to give up our freedom as a species. Freedom is earned through strength, Velthara replied. Your people lack the strength to claim true independence in the galaxy. What exactly do you mean by strength? Lieutenant So-young asked. Velthara smiled coldly. Military power, technological advancement, the ability to impose your will on others when necessary. Humans have none of these things at a level that matters. Captain Minho could not stay quiet any longer. We have defended our colonies successfully against your attacks. Barely, Velthara said dismissively, and only because we have not used our full strength. We have been patient with you, like adults watching children play with toy weapons. The tension in the room was becoming dangerous. Counselor Thek called for a break in the discussions. During the break, Velthara approached Jae-woo privately. Commander, you seem more intelligent than most of your species. Surely you can see that resistance is pointless. What I see is someone who has never faced a real challenge, Jae-woo replied. That kind of attitude can be dangerous. Velthara's silver eyes flashed with anger. Are you suggesting that humans could challenge the Veltharian Empire? I am suggesting that underestimating any opponent is unwise. The Veltharian commander was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled in a way that made Jae-woo uncomfortable. Very well, human. Let me propose something that will settle this matter, once and for all. She raised her voice so that everyone in the room could hear. I challenge the human delegation to prove their worthiness through a demonstration of military competence. Counselor Thek looked concerned. High Commander, the mediation protocols do not allow for— This is not a formal duel, Velthara interrupted. I propose a simulated combat exercise between my personal guard and the human security team. The winner will gain significant advantage in determining the final peace terms. Jae-woo felt every eye in the room watching him. The challenge was clearly a trap. Velthara was confident that her guards would easily defeat any human force, but refusing the challenge would make humanity look weak in front of all the other galactic representatives. What type of simulation did you have in mind? Jae-woo asked carefully. The station's combat training facility. 5 warriors from each side. Non-lethal weapons only, but real tactics and real consequences. The losing commander will accept that their species is inferior in military matters. Lieutenant So-young whispered urgently in Jae-woo's ear. Commander, their guards are enhanced with genetic modifications and they carry energy weapons. Our people cannot match them in direct combat. Jae-woo knew she was right. The Veltharian personal guards were legendary throughout the galaxy. They were faster, stronger, and better equipped than any human soldier. But sometimes a leader had to make difficult choices. I accept your challenge, Jae-woo said loudly. The room erupted in surprised conversations. Captain Minho stared at his commander in shock. Even Velthara seemed momentarily surprised that he had agreed so quickly. Excellent, she said, recovering her composure. My guards will be ready in 2 hours. I hope your people are prepared to learn about real strength. As the delegates left the conference room, Minho grabbed Jae-woo's arm. Commander, what are you doing? We cannot win a direct fight against Veltharian guards. Jae-woo looked at his friend and smiled grimly. Who said anything about a direct fight? Lieutenant Dongjin and Sergeant Boram had been waiting in the corridor outside the conference room. When they heard about the challenge, both soldiers immediately volunteered for the combat team. We will need 3 more people, Jae-woo said. Engineer Taimin has combat training, So-young suggested. And Communications Officer Hye-jin was a tactical specialist before joining the fleet. That gives us 5, Dongjin said. But Commander, the Veltharian guards have personal shields and plasma weapons. Even in a simulation, they will have every advantage. Jae-woo gathered his team in a private meeting room. Listen carefully. We are not going to fight the way they expect us to fight. We are going to show them what humans do best. What is that? Sir? Sergeant Boram asked. We adapt. We improvise. We find solutions that nobody else would think of. Jay-Woo looked at each member of his team. The Veltharians have superior technology, but they have one weakness that Engineer Taemin pointed out earlier. They always use the same tactics, Taemin said, understanding immediately. Exactly. They win through overwhelming force because they have never needed to do anything else. But in 2 hours, they are going to learn something new about fighting humans. The team spent the next hour studying the station's combat training facility and planning their strategy. None of them were confident about their chances, but they were determined to make Velthara regret her arrogant challenge. As they prepared for battle, word of the combat simulation spread throughout Harmony 7. Representatives from dozens of alien species gathered to watch what many believed would be a one-sided demonstration of Veltharian superiority. The combat training facility of Harmony 7 was impressive. The large room could simulate different environments and terrains using advanced holographic technology. Today it was configured to look like an urban battlefield with buildings, streets, and various obstacles. High Commander Velthara stood in the observation deck overlooking the training area. Beside her were representatives from many alien species who had come to watch the demonstration. She looked confident and relaxed, as if the outcome was already decided. The rules are simple, Counselor Thek announced over the communication system. 5 warriors from each side. Non-lethal weapons that still register hits and simulated damage. The simulation ends when one team is completely eliminated or surrenders. Below in the training area, the 2 teams prepared their equipment. The Veltharian guards looked like professional warriors from an advanced civilization. Their armor was sleek and black with built-in energy shields. Each guard carried a plasma rifle that could fire rapid bursts of stunning energy. Captain Zenthar led the Veltharian team. He was tall even by his species standards, with scars on his blue skin that showed his experience in many battles. His 4 companions were equally impressive, moving with the smooth confidence of soldiers who had never known defeat. The human team looked very different. Lieutenant Dongjin wore standard tactical gear that seemed primitive compared to the alien armor. Sergeant Boram carried what appeared to be an old projectile rifle. Engineer Taemin had a backpack full of tools and equipment that looked more suitable for repair work than combat. Communications Officer Hai Jin wore lightweight gear and carried only a small sidearm and a tablet computer. The 5th team member was Corporal Hyunwoo from the ship's security detail, who carried a shotgun and what looked like a bag of metal parts. In the observation deck, Velthara pointed at the human team with amusement. Look at their equipment. Projectile weapons and primitive tools. It is like sending children with sticks to fight trained soldiers. A delegate from the Korthian Republic, a species known for their military expertise, nodded in agreement. The humans seem brave but foolish. This will be over quickly. Commander Jay-Woo stood quietly beside Velthara, watching his team prepare. Captain Min Ho and Lieutenant So Young were with him, both looking worried about the impossible odds their friends faced. Your people are about to learn a valuable lesson about galactic reality, Velthara said to Jay-Woo. Sometimes the kindest thing is to show someone how outmatched they truly are. You may be right, Jay-Woo replied calmly. Someone is definitely going to learn a lesson today. The simulation began with both teams starting at opposite ends of the training area. The Veltharian guards immediately formed a tight formation and began advancing down the main street. Their energy shields shimmered around them as they moved with disciplined precision. Classic Veltharian tactics, observed the Korthian delegate. Overwhelming firepower applied with perfect coordination. Very effective. The human team did something unexpected. Instead of forming their own battle line to meet the advance, they immediately scattered in different directions. Within seconds, all 5 humans had disappeared into the simulated buildings and alleyways. Captain Zenthar paused his advance, clearly not expecting this response. His team was trained to fight enemies who would meet them in direct combat. Chasing. Scattered opponents through urban terrain was not their preferred method of warfare. Cowards, one of the Veltharian guards said over the communication channel. They run instead of fighting with honor. Velthara frowned slightly. They are just delaying the inevitable. Continue the advance and flush them out. The Veltharian guards spread out slightly, but maintained their formation as they moved deeper into the simulated city. Their plasma rifles were charged and ready, and their shields would protect them from any primitive human weapons. What happened next surprised everyone in the observation deck. Engineer Taemin appeared on a rooftop and threw something that looked like a small metal cylinder. It landed near the Veltharian formation and immediately began producing a thick cloud of white smoke that spread rapidly through the street. "Smoke grenades," Lieutenant So Young said quietly. "Clever." The Veltharian Guard's advanced targeting systems were designed to work in clear conditions. The smoke interfered with their sensors and made it difficult to see more than a few meters in any direction. Captain Zenthar ordered his team to maintain formation and continue forward through the smoke. Their shields would protect them from any ambush, and the smoke would clear eventually. That was when the first projectile hit. Sergeant Boram had positioned herself in a building overlooking the street. Her old-fashioned rifle fired a solid metal bullet that struck one of the Veltharian shields. The shield held, but the impact caused a bright flash and momentary disruption. "Primitive kinetic weapons," Zenthar said with contempt. "They cannot penetrate our defenses." But then more bullets began hitting from different angles. The humans were firing from multiple positions, using the smoke as cover. Each impact on the shields caused more disruption and drained power from the Veltharian energy systems. "They are trying to overload the shield generators," the Korthian delegate observed. "An interesting tactic, but it will take hundreds of hits to work." Velthara was no longer smiling. "Why are they not returning fire properly? Stop wasting ammunition on impossible targets and eliminate the humans." The Veltharian Guards began firing plasma bursts toward the sources of the projectile attacks. Their weapons were powerful and accurate, easily destroying walls and obstacles where the humans had been hiding. But the humans were no longer there. Lieutenant Dong Jin had led his team in a pattern of movement that kept them ahead of the Veltharian response. As soon as they fired from one position, they moved to another. The aliens were always shooting at places where humans had been, not where they were now. "This is taking too long," Zenthar said, his frustration growing. "Split formation. We will surround them and end this quickly." The Veltharian Guards divided into two groups and began moving through the simulated city in parallel paths. This was exactly what the human team had been waiting for. Communications Officer Hye Jin had been busy during the first few minutes of the battle. Using her tablet computer, she had accessed the training facility's environmental controls. Suddenly, the lighting in the simulation changed from bright daylight to dim twilight. The reduced visibility gave the humans another advantage. Their eyes adapted to low light better than Veltharian eyes, and they had trained for night combat. The aliens, accustomed to fighting in optimal conditions, found the darkness unsettling. Corporal Hyunwoo made his move. He had been carrying what looked like a bag of scrap metal, but it was actually a collection of carefully prepared obstacles. He scattered them across the street in patterns that would trip up advancing enemies while remaining nearly invisible in the dim light. The first Veltharian guard to step on one of these obstacles stumbled and fell. His shield flickered as it hit the ground, and in that moment of vulnerability, Sergeant Boram's rifle found its mark. The guard's armor registered a direct hit and he was eliminated from the simulation. "First blood to the humans, Counselor," Thek announced. In the observation deck, absolute silence fell. No one had expected the humans to score the first elimination, especially not against Veltharian elite guards. Velthara's silver eyes narrowed as she watched the tactical display. Lucky shot, it changes nothing. But Captain Zenthar was beginning to realize that this battle was not going according to plan. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had faced before. They used the environment as a weapon, turned their weaknesses into strengths, and refused to engage in direct combat where the Veltharians held every advantage. Engineer Taemin appeared briefly on another rooftop and activated a device that created a loud, high-pitched sound. The noise was specifically tuned to interfere with Veltharian hearing, causing discomfort and confusion among the remaining guards. The aliens tried to locate and eliminate the source of the sound, but Taemin had already moved to a new position. The psychological effect was significant. The Veltharian guards were becoming frustrated and making mistakes. What kind of warfare is this? Demanded a delegate from the hegemony of worlds. Where is the honor in these tactics? Commander Jae-woo spoke for the first time since the battle began. There is no honor in war. There is only survival and victory. The 2nd Veltharian Guard fell to a coordinated attack. Lieutenant Dong Jin had used mirrors salvaged from the simulation buildings to redirect the guard's own plasma fire back at them. When one guard's shield was overwhelmed by his teammate's reflected shot, Corporal Hyunwoo was in position to finish him with a well-placed projectile. Captain Zenthar now faced a 3-against-5 situation, and his remaining guards were showing signs of panic. They had never encountered enemies who fought this way, using creativity and adaptation instead of superior firepower. Velthara gripped the railing of the observation deck. The demonstration that was supposed to prove Veltharian superiority was turning into something very different. Captain Zenthar crouched behind a damaged wall with his 2 remaining guards. The simulation had been running for 20 minutes, and nothing was going as planned. His elite warriors, who had never lost a battle, were being systematically outmaneuvered by humans using primitive weapons and impossible tactics. "Sir, we need to change our approach," one of his guards said quietly. "These humans fight like nothing we have encountered before." Zenthar studied the tactical display on his armor. The humans had spread out across the entire simulation area. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking when least expected and vanishing before his guards could respond effectively. In the observation deck, High Commander Velthara watched the battle with growing disbelief. The other alien delegates were whispering among themselves, clearly impressed by the human performance. This was not how the demonstration was supposed to proceed. "Your people are quite resourceful," the Korthian delegate said to Commander Jae-woo. "I have never seen anyone use urban terrain so effectively against superior forces." Jae-woo remained focused on the battle below. "My people have learned to make the most of what they have." On the battlefield, Engineer Tae-min was implementing the next phase of the human strategy. During his study of the training facility, he had discovered that the environmental controls could do more than just adjust lighting and create smoke effects. He activated a program that began generating steam from the simulation building's heating systems. Within minutes, thick water vapor joined the smoke to create an almost impenetrable fog throughout the urban environment. The Veltharian Guard's advanced sensors were completely useless now. They could barely see their own hands in front of their faces, while their targeting systems gave error messages constantly. "This is cheating," Velthara said angrily. "They are manipulating the simulation environment beyond acceptable parameters." Counselor Thek checked the rules carefully. "The environmental controls are part of the training facility. Using available resources is not against the stated rules of engagement." Lieutenant Dong Jin took advantage of the confusion to position his team for the next attack. Using hand signals and whispered communications, he coordinated a complex maneuver that would have been impossible against enemies who could see clearly. The human team had been practicing silent communication for years. They could coordinate attacks using nothing but small gestures and body movements. This skill gave them a huge advantage in the fog-covered battlefield. Sergeant Boram had found a position where she could cover multiple approach routes. Her rifle was loaded with special ammunition that Tae-min had modified during the break before the battle. Instead of solid bullets, these rounds contained small devices that created bright flashes and loud noises when they hit. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. The Veltharian Guards were becoming increasingly nervous and jumpy, firing at shadows and sounds that might or might not be human enemies. Communications Officer Hye-jin had discovered another useful function in the facility's computer system. She began playing recorded sounds through speakers hidden throughout the simulation area. Footsteps echoing from empty corridors, voices calling out from impossible locations, equipment noises that suggested human activity where no humans were present. "They are trying to drive our guards insane," Velthara observed grimly. "They are succeeding," Captain Minho said with satisfaction. The Veltharian Guards were trained to fight enemies they could see and identify. Fighting invisible opponents who could be anywhere at any time was completely outside their experience. Their superior technology meant nothing when they could not find targets to use it against. Corporal Hyunwoo emerged from the fog like a phantom warrior from an ancient legend. He had painted his face with mud and debris from the destroyed buildings, making himself nearly invisible in the dim, smoky environment. His movements were completely silent as he approached the Veltharian position. The metal obstacles he had scattered earlier were doing their job perfectly. The Veltharian guards, unable to see the ground clearly, kept stumbling over hidden traps. Each time they fell, their shields flickered, and their positions were revealed to the waiting humans. Captain Zenthar was becoming desperate. His guards were trained to win through superior firepower and advanced technology, but their weapons were useless against enemies they could not see, and their technology was being turned against them by human creativity. "Full power to all weapons," Zenthar ordered. "Destroy everything in a 50-meter radius. If we cannot see them, we will eliminate their hiding places." The 3 remaining Veltharian guards began firing plasma bursts in all directions. Their powerful weapons destroyed simulated buildings and obstacles with devastating efficiency. Walls collapsed, vehicles exploded, and entire sections of the urban environment disappeared in brilliant flashes of energy. For a moment, it seemed like the desperate tactic might work. The humans were forced to abandon several positions. Aliens laid waste anything that could provide cover. But Engineer Taemin had anticipated this possibility. The destroyed buildings had been equipped with hidden devices that Taemin had placed during the early stages of the battle. As the structures collapsed, these devices activated and began creating even more smoke, steam, and interference. Instead of clearing the battlefield, the Veltharian bombardment had made visibility even worse. Now the guards could not see anything at all, while the noise from their own weapons masked any sounds the humans might be making. The aliens had just wasted enormous amounts of energy and ammunition while actually helping their enemies. It was exactly the kind of mistake that happens when panic replaces careful thinking. Lieutenant Dongjin signaled for the final phase of the human attack plan. It was time to stop playing defensive games and go on the offensive. Sergeant Bo Ram appeared on what remained of a nearby rooftop. Instead of hiding, she stood up clearly visible and began firing rapidly at the Veltharian position. Her shots were not intended to hit the guards directly but keep their attention focused in her direction. "There," Zenthar shouted. "Focus all fire on that position." While the aliens concentrated their fire on Bo Ram's position, the other 4 humans moved into attack positions around them. The Veltharian guards were so focused on the obvious target that they failed to notice the subtle movements in the fog around them. Bo Ram dove for cover, just as plasma bolts destroyed the building where she had been standing, but her job was already done. She had given her teammates the distraction they needed. Get into positio final assault. Corporal Hyunwoo struck first. He had crawled to within arm's reach of one guard and used a simple rope snare to trip the alien warrior. As the guard fell, his shield generator sparked and failed from the impact with the ground. Hyunwoo's shotgun finished the job immediately. 3 Veltharians remaining, Counselor Thek announced. 5 humans remaining. The mathematics of the battle had shifted dramatically. What had started as a hopeless fight for the humans was now heavily in their favor. But more importantly, the momentum was completely on the human side. Communications Officer Hyejin had been saving her most creative trick for the end of the battle. Using her computer skills, she had figured out how to hack into the Veltharian armor communication systems during the chaos of the bombardment. Suddenly, Captain Zenthar and his remaining guards began hearing voices in their helmets. The voices sounded exactly like their teammates, but they were giving contradictory orders and reporting false information. "Captain, I see 3 humans approaching the north," came a voice that sounded exactly like the guard who had been eliminated 10 minutes earlier. "Negative, sir, they are coming from the south," said another familiar voice. "All units, fall back to position 7. Ordered a third voice that sounded like Zenthar himself. The psychological effect was devastating. The 2 remaining Veltharians began turning in circles, trying to respond to threats that did not exist while missing the real dangers that surrounded them. They could no longer trust their own senses or their communication equipment. Engineer Taemin made his final contribution to the battle. He had rigged the simulation's gravity generator to create small pockets of reduced gravity in specific areas. When Captain Zenthar stepped into one of these zones while responding to a false alarm, his heavy armor suddenly felt weightless, and he lost his balance completely. As the Veltharian captain flailed helplessly in the low-gravity field, Lieutenant Dongjin emerged from the fog with perfect timing. His simple projectile weapon found its mark, and Captain Zenthar was eliminated from the simulation. The last Veltharian guard found himself alone, surrounded by invisible enemies in an environment that had become completely hostile. His advanced technology meant nothing when he could not see his targets or trust his own equipment. The guard spun around desperately, firing plasma bursts at shadows and echoes. His weapon's energy was running low, his shield generator was overheating, and he had no idea where his enemies were located. Sergeant Boram appeared directly in front of him, no longer hiding. "Surrender," she said simply. "You have fought well, but this battle is over." The guard looked around desperately for support that was no longer there. His plasma rifle was still functional and his shields. The conference room was filled with tension as both delegations returned from the combat demonstration. High Commander Velthara walked slowly to her seat, her silver eyes still showing the shock of what she had witnessed. Her personal guards followed behind her, their pride clearly wounded by their unexpected defeat. Commander Jaewu took his place across from Velthara at the negotiating table. The other alien delegates whispered among themselves, discussing the remarkable battle they had just observed. Everyone understood that something significant had changed in the balance of power. Councillor Thek called the session to order. "The demonstration has been completed according to the agreed terms. High Commander Velthara, do you wish to make any statements regarding the outcome?" Velthara was quiet for a long moment. Her hands rested on the table in front of her, and Jaewu could see that they were trembling slightly. The absolute confidence she had shown earlier was gone, replaced by something that looked like confusion, and perhaps even fear. "The simulation was unexpected," she finally said. "The human tactics were unlike anything in our military databases." Captain Zenthar, who was seated behind his commander, spoke up for the first time since the battle. "High Commander, permission to address the delegation?" Velthara nodded without looking at him. Zenthar stood and faced the human delegation directly. "Commander Jaewu, I owe you and your warriors an apology. We underestimated your capabilities and your intelligence. That was a mistake that cost us the battle." Lieutenant Dongjin, who was seated near the back of the room, accepted the apology with a respectful nod. "Captain, your guards fought with honor. They simply fought a different kind of battle than they expected." "That is exactly the problem," Zenthar continued. "We have become so accustomed to winning through superior technology that we forgot the importance of tactical flexibility. Your people showed us that creativity and adaptation can overcome almost any technological advantage." The Korthian delegate leaned forward with interest. "Captain Zenthar, are you saying that the Veltharian military has become too dependent on its advanced weapons?" Zenthar looked at his commander for permission to speak freely. Velthara gave him a slight nod, though she still seemed lost in her own thoughts. "Yes," Zenthar said honestly. "For the past several centuries, we have faced no opponents who could challenge our technology. We developed one way of fighting, and assumed it would always be sufficient. Today we learned that assumption was dangerous." Engineer Taemin stood up from his position with the human delegation. "Captain, if I may suggest something, your technology is truly impressive. The problem is not with your equipment, but with how you use it." "Explain," Velthara said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. Taemin moved to the center of the room where everyone could see him clearly. "Your plasma weapons are incredibly powerful, but you always use them at maximum settings. Your shields are nearly impenetrable, but you rely on them completely instead of using movement and cover. Your sensors are very advanced, but they become useless when conditions are not perfect." He gestured toward the Veltharian delegation. "You have all the tools you need to adapt to different situations, but you have never needed to learn how to use them creatively." Captain Minho added his own observations. In the simulation, your guards kept trying to fight the battle they wanted to fight. They never adjusted to fight the battle that was actually happening. Velthara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Are you suggesting that the mighty Veltharian Empire has grown weak? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every delegate in the room held their breath, waiting to see how the humans would respond to this direct confrontation. Commander Jae-woo stood to face her. Hi, Commander. I am suggesting that any military force that stops learning and adapting will eventually face defeat. Your empire is not weak, but it may be unprepared for certain types of conflicts. What types of conflicts? Velthara demanded. Conflicts against enemies who refuse to fight on your terms, Jae-woo replied calmly. Enemies who use unconventional tactics. Enemies who turn their weaknesses into strengths, and your strengths into weaknesses. Lieutenant So-young stood up and activated a holographic display that showed the tactical analysis of the recent battle. Hi, Commander. May I show you something interesting about the simulation? Velthara nodded, though her expression remained hostile. The display showed the movement patterns of both teams during the battle. The Veltharian guards had moved in predictable formations and patterns, while the human team had moved in seemingly random but actually carefully coordinated ways. Your guards made excellent tactical decisions based on standard military doctrine, So-young explained. Every move they made was textbook perfect for conventional warfare. The problem was that we were not fighting a conventional battle. The display shifted to show energy consumption patterns. Your weapons and shields consume power at a steady rate throughout the battle. Our weapons used very little power, but we supplemented them with environmental effects and psychological warfare. Sergeant Boram joined the presentation. We could not match your firepower, so we did not try to. Instead, we made your firepower irrelevant by controlling when and where you could use it effectively. Communications Officer Heejin added her analysis. Your communication systems are excellent for coordinating attacks, but they were vulnerable to interference and deception. We turned your own coordination against you. Corporal Hyunwoo spoke last. Your armor protected you from direct attacks, but it made you overconfident. You stopped using cover and movement because you thought your shields would handle everything. The presentation concluded with a detailed breakdown of how each human tactic had exploited a specific Veltharian assumption or limitation. The analysis was thorough, professional, and undeniably accurate. Velthara stared at the holographic display for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was much quieter than before. You are saying that our greatest strengths became our greatest weaknesses. In this particular situation, yes, Jae-woo confirmed. But that does not mean your military is inferior. It means that any military must be prepared to face unexpected challenges. Captain Zenthar studied the tactical analysis with obvious fascination. Commander, could your people teach us these adaptive tactics? The question surprised everyone in the room. A few hours earlier, the Veltharians had been demanding human surrender. Now their military leader was asking for training from the same humans he had planned to defeat easily. Jae-woo considered the request carefully. Captain, we would be honored to share our knowledge with professional soldiers like your guards. But such training would require mutual respect and cooperation. Velthara turned away from the holographic display and faced Jae-woo directly. Commander, I came to these negotiations believing that humanity was a minor obstacle to Veltharian expansion. I plan to offer you terms that would end your independence while avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a note of something that sounded like respect. I now realize that I fundamentally misunderstood what humanity represents. You are not a minor obstacle. You are a potential threat to any empire that becomes too comfortable with its own superiority. The other alien delegates leaned forward with intense interest. This was exactly the kind of admission that could change the entire nature of the peace negotiations. High Commander, Counselor Thek said carefully, are you prepared to revise the terms that your government proposed? Velthara looked around the room at all the watching faces. Her silver eyes met Jae-woo's gaze and held it for several seconds. Yes, she said finally. I believe new terms are necessary. terms based on equality rather than dominance. The conference room erupted in surprised conversations as delegates realized they were witnessing a historic moment. The demonstration, that was supposed to prove human inferiority, had instead convinced one of the galaxy's most powerful military leaders to completely change her position. 3 days later, the peace negotiations had transformed completely. The conference room that had been filled with tension and hostility now buzzed with productive discussion and mutual respect. High Commander Velthara sat across from Commander Jaewu, but the dynamic between them had changed dramatically. Article 7 of the proposed treaty establishes joint patrol zones along our mutual borders. Councillor Thek read from the draft document. Both human and Veltharian forces will share responsibility for maintaining peace in these regions. Captain Minho reviewed the terms on his datapad. This is far better than anything we hoped to achieve when we arrived at Harmony 7. Lieutenant So Young nodded in agreement. Equal partnership instead of subjugation. The combat demonstration certainly changed the negotiating environment. Velthara overheard their quiet conversation and turned to address them directly. Lieutenant, the demonstration did more than change negotiations. It changed my understanding of what strength really means. She gestured toward Captain Zenthar, who was deep in discussion with Lieutenant Dong Jin about tactical training methods. My captain has spent the past 2 days learning from your warriors. He tells me that human military doctrine contains concepts that are completely absent from our traditional training. Engineer Taemin looked up from his technical discussion with Veltharian scientists. High Commander, your people have been very interested in our adaptive engineering techniques. We modify our equipment for specific situations rather than using standard configurations. That is exactly what I mean, Velthara replied. The Veltharian Empire has grown accustomed to having the best technology in the galaxy. We assumed that technological superiority would always guarantee victory. Your people showed us how dangerous that assumption can be. Communications Officer Hai Jin joined the conversation. High Commander, if I may ask, how will your government react to these new treaty terms? They are very different from your original proposals. Velthara smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Harmony 7, the expression seemed genuine rather than condescending. My government sent me here with full authority to negotiate whatever terms I believed were necessary. They trusted my judgment about human capabilities. She paused and looked directly at Commander Jaewu. I will be returning home with a detailed report about what I learned here. I believe the Veltharian High Council will be very interested in establishing closer relations with humanity. Sergeant Boram, who had been listening quietly, asked the question that everyone was thinking. High Commander, what exactly will you tell them about us? Velthara considered her answer carefully. I will tell them that humanity represents something we have not encountered before. You are a species that has learned to thrive despite having limited resources and inferior technology. That ability makes you valuable as allies and dangerous as enemies. Captain Zenthar looked up from his discussion with the human security team. High Commander, with your permission, I would like to request that some of our military advisors visit human training facilities. We have much to learn about adaptive tactics. Granted, Velthara said immediately. In fact, I intend to recommend a formal military exchange program between our species. The Korthian delegate, who had been observing the negotiations with great interest, addressed both delegations. This treaty could serve as a model for other species as well. The galaxy has seen too many conflicts based on assumptions about technological or military superiority. Councillor Thek nodded approvingly. The Galactic Mediation Council will certainly study this agreement. The principles of mutual respect and shared responsibility could benefit many other diplomatic situations. Commander Jaewu stood and walked to the large viewport that showed the stars beyond Harmony 7. Captain Minho joined him, and they watched the traffic of ships from many different species moving through the space around the station. Do you think this peace will last? Minho asked quietly. I think it has a better chance than most, Jaewu replied. Velthara learned something important about humanity, but more importantly, she learned something about her own people's limitations. Lieutenant So Young approached them with a final copy of the treaty for review. Commander, The terms include provisions for technology sharing, joint military exercises, and cultural exchange programs. This goes far beyond a simple peace agreement. Jae-woo, read through the document one more time. When we arrived here, I thought our best possible outcome would be avoiding total surrender. Instead, we are gaining recognition as an equal partner in galactic affairs. Velthara overheard his comment and approached the human delegation. Commander, I owe you a personal apology. When I first met you, I treated you as if you were a primitive savage who needed to be taught his place in the galaxy. She extended, her hand in the human gesture of greeting that she had learned during the negotiations. I now understand that you and your people have much to teach the galaxy about survival, adaptation, and the true meaning of strength. Jae-woo shook her hand firmly. Hi, Commander. I believe this treaty marks the beginning of a beneficial relationship between our species. Both humans and Veltharians can learn from each other. Engineer Taimin brought over a group of Veltharian scientists who wanted to discuss collaborative research projects. Commander, they are particularly interested in our resource conservation techniques and modular technology designs. Corporal Hyunwoo was demonstrating improvised equipment modifications to fascinated Veltharian engineers. You see, when you cannot afford to build new equipment for every situation, you learn to modify what you have. Communications Officer. Hee-jin was sharing human communication protocols with Veltharian technical specialists. Our systems are designed to work even when partially damaged or operating in hostile environments. As the final treaty signing ceremony began, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered to witness the historic moment. What had started as a potential surrender negotiation had become a template for a new kind of interspecies relationship. Hi. Commander Velthara addressed the assembled delegates before signing the treaty. Today marks a turning point not just for the Veltharian Empire and humanity, but for how we think about strength and cooperation in the galaxy. She looked directly at Commander Jae-woo and his team. These humans taught me that true strength comes not from having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. True strength comes from the ability to adapt, to learn, and to find solutions where others see only problems. When the signing ceremony was complete, Captain Zenthar approached Lieutenant Dongjin one final time. Lieutenant, I have a question that has been troubling me since our battle. Ask anything you like, Captain. How did you know that our tactics would be so predictable? How did you prepare for an enemy you had never fought before? Dongjin smiled and gestured toward his human teammates. Captain, we prepared by assuming that you would fight the way that had always worked for you in the past. Most people, including humans, tend to repeat their successes. Sergeant Boram added her perspective. We studied every recorded battle involving Veltharian forces. You always used the same approaches because they always worked. We planned for what you would do, not what you could do. Zenthar nodded slowly. You turned our experience into a weakness. Only in that specific situation, Communications Officer Hee-jin clarified. In a different battle, with different conditions, your experience might have been the deciding factor. Engineer. Taemin concluded the discussion. The key is to never assume that what worked before will always work again. Every situation requires fresh thinking. As both delegations prepared to depart Harmony 7, Velthara transmitted a personal message to Commander Jae-woo. Commander, you have given me a gift that is more valuable than any technology or weapon. You have given me humility and the knowledge that there is always more to learn. She paused and looked out at the stars that both their species would now share more peacefully. I came here planning to teach you a lesson about power. Instead, you taught me a lesson about wisdom. That is a debt I will not forget, Commander Jae-woo replied with equal sincerity. Hi, Commander. The best lessons are the ones we learn together. I believe our species will continue teaching each other for many years to come. As the human and Veltharian fleets departed Harmony 7, together, other species throughout the galaxy began receiving reports about the remarkable negotiations. The story of how humanity had earned respect through ingenuity rather than intimidation would be told and retold across countless worlds. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a species that has learned to survive against impossible odds. And humanity had proven that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating an enemy, but from turning that enemy into a friend.